Rookie phenom Victor Wembanyama has been living up to the massive expectations set for him by fans, showing why most considered him a generational talent before he even touched an NBA court. After initially being good but inconsistent in his rookie campaign, which is only normal for a rookie, Wemby seems to have really locked it in for the past few months. He still has off games, but you can bet those games are getting rarer and rarer. For a good example, we'll look at the month of January this year. Wemby actually never scored under 16 points, and ended off averaging 24 points per game for the whole month on 50% shooting. Combine this with the fact that Wemby had a number of games above 10 rebounds or 3 blocks, and we can see that this month is a promising window into Wemby's future. The thing is though, Wemby's future might be coming sooner than later. While he offensively peaked in January of this year, he really has kept the ball rolling. He's had a number of 30-point games since that month, and something that's arguably more impressive is that he's had 15 games getting 5 blocks or more since the start of January. The development of Victor Wembanyama has been exceeding even the most optimistic people's expectations, it seems. So why are the Spurs basically bottom of the league if Wemby has been on a rampage for the last 3 months? Long story short, the Spurs are not exactly a great team outside of the French phenom himself. And Wemby needs at least some help if he wants to win anything in his career, especially in the eternally stacked Western Conference. Going into the offseason, the Spurs need to try their hardest to surround Wemby with something other than the circus. I mean, the Spurs literally have Jeremy Sohan playing point guard this year, while shooting free throws with one hand. Yeah, things are rough for the Spurs outside of their lone star Victor Wembanyama. This is making fans wonder, where do the Spurs go from here? How do you surround Wemby with not only the best talent, but the best talent that's going to fit around him in the near future when he's fully running that team? There are a lot of questions to answer, but before we get into that, we have to explore just how perfect this opportunity of a generational player actually living up to the expectations is for the Spurs, and why they can't let it go to waste. The Spurs definitely don't need any more proof Wemby is fully deserving of having a team built around him, and fast. Let's take a deeper look at some of Wemby's individual performances over the past few months. Here's a close loss to the Grizzlies where Wemby dropped 31 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Here's an OT win over the Nets where Wemby got 33 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 blocks. Another good one is a dominant win over the Pacers with Wemby getting 31 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 blocks. The team once atop the West, OKC, was also defeated by Wemby and the Spurs after he dropped 28 points, 13 rebounds, and 7 blocks. He also had a 10-block game against the Raptors, which crushed them. If you noticed, all of these games were wins besides the Grizzlies game, which was lost by 2 points. It's clear as day that Wemby can and will drag his team across the finish line. It becomes more clear when you realize that the Spurs basically don't win games that Wemby doesn't go nuclear in. Their only wins in the past 2 months have been those games just listed, besides a very recent game where Wemby definitely still did his part. Wemby needs help. Imagine what he can do with a few years of development, raising his consistency, and more importantly, what he can do with a team that doesn't rely on him to have an inhuman game every single night. We are almost definitely witnessing a generational player in Victor Wembanyama, capable of great games most nights, but even the generational talents had help. Jordan had Pippen, LeBron had a lot of people, and Pat Bev had Ant-Man. The faster they can get Wemby another good player and solid team around him, the better. Wemby's also not only going to be great on the court, he's perfect for the NBA off the court. He seems to be a great locker room guy and will almost definitely turn into a great leader with some extra years in the league. He's humble and well-spoken enough to be liked, but he's got a cocky and competitive side to him, and that makes him interesting. It's certainly in the NBA's best interest to have this guy be on a primetime worthy team for the rest of his career. It's just up to the Spurs to follow through on making that a reality. So what exactly do the Spurs need to do?
With Victor already breaking out in his rookie season to average 21 and 10 while leading the league in blocks by a very wide margin, there should be absolutely no hesitation when it comes to the Spurs completely going all in on this kid as fast as they're able to. Anyone who's spent the painstaking time to actually sit through and watch multiple games of the San Antonio Spurs this year can tell you that it's pretty obvious how the Spurs actually ended up with the first overall pick to get Wemby in the first place. To put it plainly, this team, with the exception of Victor Wembanyama, is horrible. As many people know, this isn't the first time that the Spurs have lucked out by getting a generational talent with the first overall selection. But this time, things are a little different. Before, when the Spurs had drafted David Robinson, there was already an established culture of winning thanks to George Gervin carrying the franchise to a bunch of playoff series. Then the year before Tim Duncan was set to be drafted, the Spurs' record finishing out that season didn't really reflect their overall dominance, as thanks to David Robinson suffering an injury that put him out for the entire season, they were able to slide their way into the draft lottery and walk away with the first pick. So the team started off in Timmy's rookie year already winning 56 games, before going on the following season to win Tim Duncan his first ever ring in just his second year in the league. But as of today, there is little left of that winning culture left in San Antonio. The last time the Spurs had made the playoffs was in 2019, and they got booted out in the first round. Before that, the last time that they were a real threat was when Kawhi was still on the team, almost a decade ago now. Since then, the roster has completely changed to the point that aside from Cedi Osman and Zach Collins, there isn't a player on this roster who's experienced a single minute of playoff basketball. And both Cedi and Zach weren't even on the San Antonio Spurs when they did make the playoffs. This team is very young, and unfortunately, we've seen younger teams like the Charlotte Hornets who pretty much put winning as a second priority. And that isn't the type of culture that you want to foster around Wemby, especially given his comments already expressing a deep desire to hoist up the Larry O'Brien as early as possible. So that leaves the question of what this team should do. Well, first, they should find a time machine, go back to last year's offseason, and start there. There was plenty of cap space to use to get at least a decent player to pair with Wemby. But the fact that they did nothing last offseason shows that they might not be in a rush when they really should be. The fact that Wemby has gone his first year in the league without a true point guard beside him is pretty wild. The team ran Jeremy Sohan at the point for way longer than they should have if it was just an experiment, which led to many missed opportunities for Wemby. Pop did make the adjustment and started running more lineups with Trey Jones, which has led to more success, but being as dynamic of a player that Wemby is, there seems to be a lot of games where it looks like he's just getting set up for a patent 10-foot jump shot when they can't figure out how to actively get him going in a lineup against tougher defense. So the first thing that this team needs to do is go out and grab a point guard to pair up with Wemby. If you start there, you'll have a better idea of what the true potential of this team is, and you can build out from there. And it just so happens that one of the league's most consistent passers might be going on the trade market this offseason. The Atlanta Hawks are the definition of mid, and it seems like the experiment of bringing in DeJounte Murray seems like it's failing. And with many reports suggesting that the Hawks were looking to move on from Murray at this year's trade deadline, it was kind of a surprise that a deal never actually ended up coming through, suggesting that there isn't a real big market out there for DeJounte. Not the market that the Hawks thought there would be, anyway. So the team might actually be forced to move on from Trae Young, similarly to the situation with Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. Sometimes if the right deal isn't there, you have to send off the better player just to avoid disaster in the future. If that does end up happening, then the Spurs should be leaping at the chance to pair Wemby with one of the league's scariest lob threats in Trae Young. Another possible player that they could go out and get is Chris Paul. CP3 is definitely getting up there in age, but that doesn't take away anything from his resume as a pure point guard. Not only would this improve the team's offense, but would also add a much needed vet presence to this team. And with CP3, there's already a bona fide trail to success that he can have while mentoring younger players, as SGA being in the top 5 for MVP voting is very much proof to that fact. So this way, they can still develop their squad in-house while also showing Victor you actually care about improving the team. As good as Victor Wembanyama has been, the teams in the West are getting better also, as talent continues to flood into the league. Look at Luka through the past few seasons, completely dominating teams, only to find himself buried deep in the middle of the standings, which for Luka has also been a major contributing factor into why he's also so far down on MVP voting lists year after year, with that award often being unfairly skewed to favor the standings, debatably more than it should. Similarly to LeBron James as well, who again, despite individually dominating the league, didn't win his first MVP award until he finally had his Cavs as the first seed in the East. So even if the Spurs think that they can do this build slowly while keeping Wemby happy with MVP votes, they might have another thing coming. So in order to take advantage of Wemby's greatness while keeping him happy, and most importantly, on the team, they should start making moves to prove that they actually care about getting Wemby one step closer to being an NBA champion. If you made it this far, give the video a like. While you're down there, you might as well just subscribe and let us know in the comments how you feel about Victor Wembanyama and his rookie campaign. As for that, we'll see you next week for the upload.